Okay, so obviously this is a chart of the digestive system. So we're just going to pretend that you're going to be eating a piece of food. So let's just say your mouth is around here, right? When you eat a piece of food, the food goes into the mouth, and then from there, while you're chewing, you have certain enzymes and saliva that mixes with the food, and it goes down a very long tube called the esophagus. Do you know where that is in your body? Okay, so it's basically from the right behind, underneath your chin, all the way down to the middle of your chest, and then the food finally goes into the stomach. Now the stomach over here is where the digestion begins, but there's no absorption or assimilation of nutrients quite yet. The stomach works like a washing machine where it separates the food because there's hydrochloric acid and pepsin that's released right here in the stomach. And for most people, when they think of the stomach, they kind of think about the area where their belly button is. That's actually not where the stomach is. The stomach is in the left upper corner of where you're, kind of near your rib cage, basically on the top left of your abdomen. So from here, the food's gonna separate and mix with the acids, but it's not gonna break down the food the way the teeth do. So that's why it's very important to chew when the food's in your mouth, because the stomach's not going to break things up the way the teeth will. So from there, the food's gonna go through this guy here called the duodenum. So this is actually what it looks like, opened up for us so we can have a look inside. You see there's a yellow duct here. You see there's a green duct here. Well, the yellow duct releases enzymes from the pancreas, and the green duct releases bile from the gallbladder. So you have a mixture of enzymes and bile, and they basically help dilute the acids that were from the stomach. So it mixes it right here in the duodenum, the bile, the enzymes in the food, and then it moves through here where it finally reaches the small intestine. Now this is where the digestion continues, but there's absorption and assimilation of the food that we ate. So this small intestine here on this chart is put over here in the corner so we can have a look at what's underneath. You can see this blue net, but in reality, the small intestine is all right in here in the middle. The small intestine, on average, is about 25 feet long.
Yeah, you can see
right?
it up in the upper left.
Right here.
No, the woman on the upper left.
Right here.
Yeah,
So
takes
it's
the whole space.
whole space. So if you can see here, it's from right underneath where her rib cage is here down to basically where her pubic bone is here too. So from inside here, the food is going to go into the small intestine, and what's going to happen is the food's going to go into, this is what it looks like inside the small intestine. There's all these little tiny things called villi. Each villi is about the size of a hair. So the food is actually going to be absorbed by the villi. So again, when I mentioned about chewing in the mouth with your teeth, you can see how if the food doesn't fit into the little villi, then the body's gonna have a hard time absorbing it. So the food and the blood, because all of the villi inside the small intestine are filled with blood, the food and the blood are gonna go into this blue net here, and it's called the mesenteric. From there, the food and the blood will go to the portal vein, and from there, the food and the blood will go to the liver. The liver is actually the one that distributes all the nutrients throughout the entire body here. So whatever we don't chew very well or whatever is wasted the body, hopefully, because we talk about 25 feet and there's a lot of corners here and layers, the food will make its way down, that waste will make its way down to the ileocecal valve here. And that waste will go into the colon or the large intestine. They're both the same thing. So the waste will go into the colon, it'll go up the ascending colon, through the transverse colon, down to the ascending colon, through the sigmoid colon, through the rectum, and then out the waste goes. So the food only goes through the places that I mentioned to you. You can see it's basically one long tube. It doesn't go anywhere else besides those places. So it kind of gives you an idea how, because it's one long tube, but it's not a straight tube, how it'd be important to keep that clean. So this is a different chart. It basically is the same exact thing. It just has words to verify what we were explaining before. This girl's eating an apple, and then she swallows it. It goes down the esophagus, and then it goes into the stomach and the upper left-hand part of the abdomen, where its job is to mix and digest, sort of like a washing machine. From there, it's gonna go through the duodenum, and then the digestion continues, and then it finally reaches the small intestine, all 25 feet long, and the small intestine's job is to digest and absorb nutrients. You can see here, whatever we don't chew very well or is waste to the body because we can absorb it, it's gonna go through the ileocecal valve here, and that waste is gonna go into the colon. Now, most people know the colon's job is to store waste. You can see that here. Even more importantly, the colon's job is to absorb water. So that's why we can see how it's important. In this picture, it shows how when we get a colonic, we put the speculum to here so it doesn't go anywhere further than right here. And then the water will go up here, through here, and it'll stop right here. The water doesn't go into the small intestine, but it does fill up the entire colon. Now, because the water is going there, it's gonna go straight to where it needs to go, versus if this girl were to drink a glass of water, by the time it comes down, it might need to go, you know, she might actually either pee it out or she might not be absorbing it fully, where it's gonna go all the way down and go into the colon here. So in a session, a person who is, now you have to think about it, is if they are hydrated enough, because you think about a plant. If a plant is very dry, what happens when you give it water? Usually it leaks. It doesn't just absorb all the water. So it's the same thing with the colonic, because this colon here is not like a sponge. It's made of flesh. So when we put the water in, it's the same concept. Somebody who's, you know, on the more hydrated side can probably get about 1 liter or 1.5 liters of water that they can absorb throughout an entire session. So it's very hydrating as well. So this chart here, you can see there's a lot of different diseases. So we're just gonna focus on just this kind of yellowish, there's some right here too, this yellowish kind of plaquey material here, and then you see some over here. I wanna point out that they put it over here so we can have a look at the other diseases and the other things that are going on in this picture. But in reality, you can use your imagination. This yellow stuff can be all throughout the small intestine here, or it could be all throughout the colon here too. So if you kind of look carefully, this plaquey material, the plaque is almost narrowing the passageway for the waste to go through, instead of having this much room down to this much room here. This stuff can be made out of sugars and salts, fungus, bacteria, worms, plaque, parasites, candida, which is a common type of fungus too in the body. That's the mixture right there. And in this picture, you can see how this part in the small intestine is starting to get covered up. When we showed you here in the small intestine, they have these little villi. So what's happening when you see this picture here is this material is not only covering the villi that's supposed to be absorbing the nutrients, it's also covering the villi for other nutrients to come in. And what ends up happening is we're absorbing this stuff 24/7. And I'm sure, you know, some of you know someone, or can even relate yourself to when you eat a piece of food, or you have something, you know, that causes you to blow, or maybe you get gas right away. A lot of people think, oh, okay, it's the food. But if you think about it, this stuff produces methane gas and hydrogen gas. So when you eat a piece of food, it needs to also react to something. And let's just pretend it's, you know, a piece of cake. There are people who, you know, at 4 years old, they could eat a piece of cake and still be running around, lots of energy. You know, their bodies didn't have any crazy reaction. But then now, 40 years later, they have the same piece of cake. And what happens is immediately they get bloated. You know, they need to go lay down, they don't feel well. Well, this stuff is the buildup that happens over time through all this, you know, certain toxins and certain foods that we eat. And we talked about chewing too. Some things get stuck along the way. This buildup is what reacts to it. So this stuff not only produces methane gas and hydrogen gas, which is the bloating and the gas, but it also produces inflammation. It kind of looks like this. And the inflammation also produces methane gas and hydrogen gas. So the whole goal of a colonic, basically, especially in this specific technique, is at first we're gonna at least clean out the colon. You know, that's our job. We're gonna clean out the colon. But then what's gonna happen is we're gonna soak the colon throughout the entire session, because we're not going to empty the water until the very end of the session. So the entire time the colon is going to drink the water and absorb it, just like we showed in the other chart. It's, you know, one of their major jobs. And just like soaking dishes, I'm sure you know when you soak dishes for a while, things start to fall apart, versus having to go in and scrub it without any water. That's a lot more difficult than just letting it sit there and soak. Things aren't only start to fall apart, but they just slide off and nothing can stick to it. So we want to get the colon nice and hydrated, similar to that way, so then the stuff from the small intestine can start filtering through and coming out this way too. And so not only do we clean out the colon in the session, we start getting some of the stuff from the small intestine out, and then that's what we see through the camera on the screens in the bathroom.
I know everybody's different. Can you go back to the other picture? Oh, so that plaque that you've been talking about is the chunks that we see in the colon hydrotherapy from time to time?
Yeah, this stuff here, you can see how it basically sticks to the walls, and it can be a mixture of different things as well. Yeah.
So on the other...
Are you talking about this chart?
Yeah, on that chart. If you imagine someone doing an enema, about how filled do you think people get with an enema? Do you think they go all the way through the transverse colon and ascending colon?
Now there's a couple different things that could also happen in an enema, which is why usually people only clean out a certain amount, even though they can sit there for like 40 minutes, you know, and hold the water in, is depending on the pressure of the water. Sometimes, you know, you could get the water all the way here, let's just say, but then things, instead of getting loosened up, sometimes gets pushed back here to the ascending colon. So for the most part, you know, in an enema, and yes, everybody's kind of different because, I mean, you know, depending on just what's in the colon at the time, usually people are getting out more of this area or what's ready to come out, you know, from the colon. But at the same time, that's not to say that things from the transverse colon can't also move through this way too. But for the most part, depending on hydration, things can get pushed out this way. So you're at least cleaning out the sigmoid colon, you know, in an enema. But that's why there's different types in enemas too, where you can control the flow and control the amount of pressure with the water as well.
Great. Thank you so much.